Chapter 1. The Empire's Secrets. The lecture hall at Altdorf University was a crumbling monument of aged stone and fading grandeur. The dome ceiling, once painted in vibrant frescoes of celestial constellations and Sigmar's triumphs, now peeled and flaked like sunburnt skin. Dust hung thick in the slanted afternoon light, and the sour smell of mildew rose from the velvet-lined benches. Yet, despite the stifling air and decrepit charm, the room was packed. Professor Theodric Hulbrecht, scholar of antiquities and dangerous truth, stood before the crowd of restless students and scholars, one boot propped casually on a battered lectern. His shirt was half untucked, his cravat undone, and his dark leather coat bore the unmistakable stains of travel, mud, blood, and something less identifiable that gave off a faintly reptilian musk. "And so we must ask," he said, gesturing dramatically toward a chalkboard smeared with runic scribbles and crude maps of Lustria, "if the lizardmen truly built their temples to worship the old ones, or were they built to contain something far older and more terrifying?" The students exchanged glances, some furiously scribbling notes, while others simply gawked. His lectures were legendary, part academia, part blasphemy, and part theater. The faculty hated him for it. Theodric wiped the chalk from his hands on his sleeve, then leaned forward with a conspiratorial grin. "Let me be clear. What lies beneath the temple of Exhatle predates even the Old One's arrival. I've seen the glyphs with my own eyes, etchings that do not match any known slant dialect, and The great double doors of the lecture hall banged open with a thunderous boom, echoing like cannon fire. Every head turned. A man staggered in. He was barely clothed, wrapped in blood-stained rags, his boots shredded, his face blackened with sunburn and soot. One eye was swollen shut, his lip torn. Yet he carried something, clutched to his chest with both arms, a satchel of thick, oiled leather, stitched with the crest of the Royal Cartographers' Guild. Theodric's expression froze. "Roderick?" The man collapsed. Students screamed and scattered. Theodric vaulted over the lectern and sprinted down the aisle. He knelt beside the broken explorer, pushing aside tangled hair and pressing fingers to his throat. Alive, but barely. "Water!" Theodric barked, and someone brought a flask. He tilted it to Roderick's lips, but the man choked, spluttered, and grabbed Theodric's wrist with unnatural strength. "I found it," he croaked. "Catch me. It's real. The tomb lies buried beyond the black glass hills, past the moss scar." Theodric's breath caught in his throat. "That's Nehekhara." Roderick gave a hideous, gurgling laugh. "Thought it was lizardmen. But it's not. It's both. They stole from each other. Corrupted." He fumbled with the satchel, pushing it into Theodric's chest. "Take it, burn it, before he sees it again, before it calls to him." Who? Who sees what? But Roderick's eyes were rolling back, his breath shallow. His fingers clutched Theodric's collar with such intensity they tore the fabric. "You don't get it, Theo. He's not dead. He's just waiting." Blood bubbled from his lips, and then he went still. Theodric sat back in stunned silence as the other scholars stared down from the gallery. Roderick was a madman, a treasure-seeker turned husk by the southern wilds, but he had never lied. With reverent hands, Theodric opened the satchel. Inside was a scroll, brittle and yellowed, inscribed with ink that shimmered faintly green. The writing was ancient glyphs, Nehekharan, but twisted. Overlapping that was a lizardmen cartouche, scratched violently over top. Something about the contrast made Theodric's eyes ache. Beneath the scroll was a relic, a golden disc, no larger than a man's palm, etched with concentric circles and strange pulsating runes. Its surface seemed to crawl and twist under the light, and as Theodric touched it, he felt an instant wave of nausea and vertigo. He smelled desert air, heard the hiss of ancient sand shifting, and then a whisper, impossibly faint. "Collect." Theodric recoiled, nearly dropping the artifact. From the rear of the hall, Professor Karlstein, a pale, tight-lipped man who despised Theodric, descended the stairs. "What in Sigmar's name is happening here?" he demanded. "This man is dead, and you're pawing through his things like a looter?" Theodric didn't answer. He stared at the artifact in his hand, heartbeat pounding. Whatever Roderick had found, it wasn't meant to be unearthed. And something ancient had just noticed. Chapter 2. Forbidden Lore. The artifact refused to remain still. Professor Theodric Halbrecht watched it pulse gently on his desk in the candle-lit gloom of his office, as though it breathed, a faint golden shimmer exuding from the etchings, with a rhythm that did not match the flicker of flame or the creak of the old stone walls around him. He had sealed the room, drawn the heavy crimson drapes, lit 6 incense braziers, and placed the disk atop a warded circle scrawled in chalk and bloodroot. None of it calmed the damn thing. If anything, the glyphs writhed faster when watched. Outside, the midnight bells of Altdorf tolled, but Theodric hadn't slept in days. He rubbed a hand through his unkempt hair, eyes bloodshot. The research surrounding the relic had consumed him. Every tome on Nehekharan glyphs, every scrap of lizardmen lore, even forbidden texts copied from dust-slick jungle ruins in distant Lustria, they all confirmed the same thing. This artifact should not exist. The Nehekharan script beneath the shimmering Lizardmen cartouche wasn't just a corruption. It was a burial curse, twisted and ancient, with elements of summoning and sacrifice. It described a king buried with a sun heart stolen from the serpent gods, a relic meant to fuel his soul's eternal reach beyond death. And then, carved crudely over it, almost as a warning, were Old One glyphs for contain, danger, and corruption. The disk was both a key and a prison. Theodric slammed shut the final tome, coughing as centuries-old dust exploded into the air. "Sigmar preserve me! What in the hells did Roderick find?" Then the pulsing stopped. There was a moment of unnatural silence, like the air had grown too thick to breathe. The braziers flared blue, the chalk circle hissed. A whisper, barely audible, slithered across the room. "And remembers you." Theodric scrambled back, upturning a chair, hand flying to the pistol at his belt. Shadows twisted in the corners of the room, deep and oily, seeping along the floor like spilled ink. He chanted a quick word, words barely coherent through the pounding in his head. The shadows hissed, retreated. The disk went still. When the sun finally rose over the Imperial Palace rooftops, Theodric was already gone from his office, artifact wrapped tightly in lead-lined cloth and sealed inside an iron box, engraved with wards. He had only one destination in mind: the Merchants' Guild Hall of Altdorf. The hall was a fortress of wealth, stained glass depictions of heroic trade caravans, mahogany floors that creaked beneath golden boots, and the smell of perfume thick enough to choke. Theodric had cleaned up just enough to not look mad, tightened his cravat, combed his hair, smeared ink from his fingers, but his eyes still carried the wild glint of obsession. Lord Niklaus von Brecht eyed him across a marble desk, his bejeweled fingers steepled. "Another expedition, Professor? Didn't your last one end with a shipwreck and an unpaid loan?" "I brought back a stone map, carved by the Slan themselves," Theodric snapped, "which you sold to the Marienburg cartel for triple your investment." Von Brecht smirked. "Semantics. What's this one about?" Theodric hesitated. To reveal the truth was dangerous, but lying would gain him nothing. Slowly he unlatched the iron case and unfolded the artifact's cloth. Even in the bright sunlight of the office, the disk pulsed dimly. Von Brecht leaned forward. His smirk vanished. "That's Lizardmen?" he asked. "Partially. The other half is Nehekharan. This disc was found in a tomb in the Southlands, buried in a necropolis fused with jungle architecture. It predates the founding of Khemri. It could be the last remnant of a forgotten war between the dead and the scaled. Von Breck stared at the object like it might explode. "And you want to go there?" "I need to go there," Theodric said, voice low and urgent. "Whatever this relic was guarding, it's stirring again. There's power in it, power enough to raise kings and awaken horrors. I've seen the signs already." Von Brecht leaned back, silent for a moment. Then, "Do you have a crew?" "I'll assemble one. Mercenaries, a guide, a few brave students." "You'll need more than that. There are worse things in the Southlands than mosquitoes and skinks, Professor." Theodric's jaw clenched. "I know. That's why I need to get there before anyone else does, before he wakes up completely." Von Brecht ran a thumb over his signet ring, then nodded. "You'll have your funds, but bring me something I can sell this time. Trinkets, gold, dead gods don't pay dividends." Theodric forced a grim smile. "You will have your treasure." And with that, the wheels of fate began to turn. That night, as Theodric packed maps, pistols, and hastily translated scrolls, a raven landed on his windowsill. It stared at him with lidless eyes, cocked its head, and dropped a blackened human finger wrapped in spider silk thread. In the thread, etched with fine, meticulous claws, was a message. "The Collector remembers. You are already his." Chapter 3. Into the Desert. Theodric Halbrecht's boots crunched against brittle sand and bone as the sun blazed high above the sea of dunes, casting waves of heat that rippled the air into illusions. Nehekhara, the land of the dead, spread before them like the skin of a bleached corpse, cracked, endless, and merciless. The air reeked of dust, sun-scorched flesh, and the acrid tang of dried blood that never seemed to leave your nostrils. Behind him, a ragged column trudged forward. 10 mercenaries in battered scale and patchwork plate. 3 oxen pulled carts filled with supplies, and 2 scholars from Altdorf University. Master Dirken, a gaunt man with too much theory and too little field experience, and Lucretia Valls, a flame-hailed linguist with more knives than books and an attitude sharp enough to flay a demon. Theodric glanced up at the horizon, where ruined spires jutted like broken teeth. 2 more days to Ket Maquette, he muttered. "That's if the damn map's right," grunted Sergeant Holtz, a bear of a man with a hooked nose and knotted arms covered in tribal scars. He marched beside Theodric, clutching a long-hafted halberd crusted with dried ichor. "And if something doesn't eat us before then." Something nearly had. 2 nights passed as they crossed the dried riverbed of the lost Ossian. Their camp had been attacked. The sentry hadn't screamed, just vanished, his blood trail leading into a fissure where jagged claw marks and a shredded helm were all that remained. Whatever had taken him had moved through the dunes without a sound, eyes reflecting the firelight only once before, melting back into the dark. Lucretia had called them Ushabti hounds, statues carved with jackal souls, now awakened by the presence of the relic. Now every night was spent under torchlight, with guns loaded and nerves frayed. Even the oxen had begun to grow skittish, lowing and foaming at the mouth at things unseen. Dirken muttered protections in a dead tongue every morning, but the desert didn't care. Nehekhara devoured the pious and the wicked alike. They passed the corpse of a treasure caravan that afternoon, 3 wagons overturned and blackened, the skeletal remains of horses and men scattered around like discarded dolls. Vultures, bloated and sluggish from days of feasting, waddled through the scene, unbothered, as the mercenaries gave it a wide berth. Theodric paused to inspect the remains. A royal banner hung torn and sun-bleached, bearing the faded crest of Prince Karnath's company, a rival expedition out of Marienburg. Their faces had been flensed. He found one, still upright, skewered against a broken chariot wheel by an obsidian spear driven through his sternum. His jaw hung loose, eyes hollow, and the skin around his mouth had been carved into a rictus grin. "By Sigmar," Lucretia whispered, hand drifting to the pistol at her belt. Theodric knelt, brushing aside the sand. This was ceremonial, precise. His fingers trembled slightly as he removed a pendant from the dead man's throat. It bore a tiny disc, identical to the relic they carried, only this one was burnt. He had one of the keys? Keys to what? Holtz growled. A soul vault, Theodric said, standing. That's what Ketemaket is. Not just a tomb, a prison. At sundown they made camp in a natural gully surrounded by jagged stone. Fires were built, weapons sharpened. Theodric pored over his maps by lantern light, fingers tracing lines that had never existed on official charts. Dirkin mumbled in sleep, eyes twitching as if plagued by dreams. One of the mercenaries, a Kislevite named Brannick, drank until he passed out beside his blade. The desert wind howled that night, and it carried more than sand. Theodric woke to screams. He bolted upright, heart hammering, and saw chaos, flames dancing wild as figures darted through the camp. Not human, thin, wrapped in strips of rotted linen, with limbs that moved in stuttering, jerking lunges. Skeletons draped in gold and bone, their mouths stretched into leering snarls. Tube guardians. Brannick's throat was torn open, a gurgling red ruin, his blade buried uselessly in the sand. Another mercenary thrashed on the ground, two guardians holding him down as a third drove a curved dagger into his gut again and again, twisting with each plunge. Blood sprayed, steam rising from it as the sand hissed. Theodric drew his pistol and fired, shattering one guardian's skull in a spray of bone and rotten flesh. Holtz bellowed, cleaving through two with a single roaring swing. Lucretia was already mid-fight, dual knives flashing as she slashed open one creature's tendons, dodged its swing, and opened its chest with a burst of greenish-black ichor. Suddenly Theodric's test was over. Theodric slashed a gauntlet, ripping out the pistol, protecting the greenish-black ichor, but they kept coming. 10, 20, 30. Durkin stood in the center of the camp, hands raised in futile prayer. He never saw the jagged axe that took his head clean off. "Fall back," Theodric shouted. "Regroup at the stone ridge." They fought their way clear, leaving fire and death behind. Only 5 mercenaries survived the assault, bloodied and wide-eyed. As dawn broke over the dunes, they reached the ridge, panting and broken. Below them, the camp burned. The guardians did not pursue, but they watched, dozens of skeletal eyes glinting in the sun, unmoving, statues once again. Holtz spat blood. "You led us into damnation, Professor." Theodric stared down at the smoking remnants of his team, the relic warm in its wrappings. "No," he said, voice hollow. "We haven't reached damnation yet." And somewhere beneath the sands, something ancient stirred, its tomb growing warmer, its memory returning, its vault incomplete. Chapter 4. The Tomb of Ketemaket. The sands peeled back like a wound. For 3 days, Theodric Halbrecht and what remained of his expedition had clawed and dug into the sun-blasted ridge that loomed over the eastern dune sea. Here, where the map's blood-streaked glyphs converged and the stars aligned to form the Eye of Petra, the tomb was waiting, its entrance buried beneath centuries of dust, dead gods, and broken memory. The ridge had bled hints, obsidian shards carved with dual glyphs, one Nehekhara, one unmistakably lizardmen, fossilized bones with elongated skulls and jaw plates lined with golden caps. Statues half buried, their forms abominable hybrids of jackal and scaled reptile, mouths twisted open in eternal screams. On the morning of the fourth day, the sand gave way. Lucretia's pickaxe struck stone, and the ground beneath her feet shuddered. A low, groaning creak rumbled through the earth, and a jagged seam split open, exhaling a breath of fetid, corpse-warm air that reeked of rotting spice, mold, and ancient, fetid incense. "Gods of Sigmar," muttered Holtz, backing away, halberd raised. They peered into the dark. A stone stair descended into the earth, spiraling and suffocating, walls etched with layers of inscriptions that shimmered in faint phosphorescent ink. They were not just Nehekharan, nor purely lizardmen. These were fused dialects, runes corrupted through purpose and ritual. The walls whispered when touched. They entered with blades drawn and lanterns raised. The descent was steep and tight. The air thickened with each step, until sweat rolled down their backs and the sound of their boots became muffled, as if the tomb itself swallowed noise. Dust fell constantly from the ceiling, like ash. At the base of the stair, a stone gate rose before them, 20 feet tall and smooth as obsidian, carved with a single central relief, a figure upon a throne of serpents and skulls. Its body was cadaverous, ribs jutting like knives, but its head was crowned by a golden headdress adorned with lizardmen feathers and a sun disk. Eyes of sapphire stared outward. "The Tomb King of Kitmekith," Theodoric whispered. "The one they called the Collector of Suns." Below the throne, a ritual inscription pulsed faintly. Lucretia read aloud in a voice that quivered with awe and unease. "Who steals the hearts of gods, who binds the sky serpents with golden leash, sleeps not in death, but in longing. Let none wake him. Let none enter, bearing the gift of memory." Holtz scowled. "What the hell does that mean?" "Soon. It means we should have brought more men," Theodoric muttered. The doors opened with a thunderous groan, releasing a wind of stale, foul air that carried with it whispers, almost too soft to hear, snatches of prayer, screams, and the dull hiss of slithering things. They stepped inside. The tomb of Kitmekith was a labyrinth of halls etched with madness, walls where scenes of battle and subjugation played out in gold relief. Tomb kings marching beside reptilian war beasts, undead sorcerers stealing solar orbs from the heavens. Slan priests crucified upside down, their hearts replaced with burning suns. Blood had once been spilled here, oceans of it. Bones littered the floor, not arranged in piles but patterns, mandalas, glyphs, and spirals, skulls of men, saros, and things that could not have existed naturally. As they passed, some turned to watch. In the central chamber, they found the relic. A dais rose from the ground, encircled by 8 golden serpents coiled in a protective ring. At the summit lay the sun heart, a disk far larger than the one Theodoric carried, almost the size of a shield. Its surface was a mirror of writhing fire, the runes so bright they seared the eyes. Around the dais were the desiccated corpses of Slan, their enormous bodies shriveled and sunken, lips pulled back from cracked fangs. Bound to the floor with chains of obsidian, their limbs shattered and mouths sewn shut with golden wire. "Dear gods," Lucretia breathed. "They died trying to contain it." Theodoric approached slowly, hand trembling as he reached out. The relic thrummed beneath his fingers. Heat poured off it, but not natural heat. It was like touching raw hunger. A star turned inside out. When he lifted it, the chamber screamed. A howl burst from the walls, vibrating through the stone, making bones dance and sand bleed from the cracks. The torches flared, then died. Theodoric clutched the relic to his chest. "We need to leave, now." Behind them, the tomb began to breathe. The air warped and shifted, and the corpses of the bound Slan twitched, bone dust erupting from their joints. A low, rattling chant echoed through the darkness, in a voice too old, too dry to belong to the living. "Who dares disturb my gallery?" The walls cracked. One of the mercenaries, Larch, screamed and opened fire randomly. The echo of gunpowder was followed by silence. Then something struck from the ceiling, a long, mummified appendage wrapped in golden bandages that impaled him through the back with sickening crunch. Blood spurted from his mouth as he was hoisted into the shadows. Holtz roared, swinging his halberd. He cleaved through a skeletal priest that emerged from the wall itself, its body bound with the fetishes of stolen gods, its face covered by a mask made of temple stone. Lucretia fired 2 shots into the darkness as more shapes slithered from the cracks. Guardians forged of bone and stolen flesh, fused with gold plating and fanged helms. They moved silently, dragging rusted weapons behind them. Theodric turned, clutching the relic, and shouted over the chaos. "Fall back to the stairs! Seal the entrance if you have to!" They ran. Blood coated the floor, screams echoed behind them. 2 more mercenaries fell, one decapitated by a whip of braided sinew, the other crushed beneath a descending stone block triggered by his dying gasp. They reached the stairs as the tomb howled behind them. As Theodric stumbled into the light above, he turned for one last glimpse. The statue of the collector was gone. In its place stood a figure wreathed in bandages and dust, gold glinting on its fleshless fingers, blue fire burning in empty eye sockets. "I remember you," it whispered. "You carry my heart." Then the doors slammed shut. Chapter 5. The Eye of Exhatle. The science screamed. It began as a low groan beneath the earth, a trembling like the slow exhale of some slumbering beast. Theodric Halbrecht felt it in his bones before he heard it, an alien grinding pulse that made his teeth ache and his spine stiffen. At the center of his satchel, the relic, the Sunheart, grew hotter with every step, its golden surface pulsing like a second heartbeat against his ribs. They had fled the tomb with only 3 mercenaries left, their faces hollow and sun-scorched, their eyes wide with the kind of madness only ancient evil could plant. Lucretia walked silently at Theodric's side, her pistol drawn, blood still drying on her cheeks where something's claws had nearly torn her face open. Behind them, Ketemekit's tomb had sealed itself, entombing whatever horror stirred inside. But it wasn't staying buried. They reached the ridge just before dusk, and Theodric collapsed to his knees, yanking the relic free from its wrappings. It thrummed in his hands like a living thing, the concentric rings around the central glyph rotating impossibly, spinning faster and faster, as if aligning with celestial orbits long since forgotten. Then the sky screamed. A ray of golden light burst from the tomb below, pure, blinding, and impossibly narrow, a spear of radiance that split the heavens and turned the sand to glass where it touched. A perfect column, reaching high into the heavens like the judgment of a god. Theodric's skin blistered as the light touched him, but he could not look away. "The Eye of Exhatle," he whispered. "A beacon." He wasn't wrong. Far beyond the dunes, in a crypt buried beneath miles of dead earth and broken bone, he stirred. Pharun'tep the Gilded Collector, king of the Sunbleat Court, who had once held dominion over both sand and jungle. Entombed for millennia, bound by the lizardmen with curses carved into his bones and sealed with a stolen relic, the very one Theodric had now freed. His sarcophagus cracked with a sound like a glacier breaking. Dust the color of old ivory billowed from its seams. Inside, a mummified titan uncoiled. Gold clung to Farun'tep like leprosy, layered masks, etched scarabs, rings in every finger joint. Jewels glistened in hollow eye sockets, glowing with a deep, malevolent blue. His crown had fused into his skull, and his spine was reinforced with sun-metal wire. Yet it was his chest that defied logic. The rib cage splayed open, and within sat a void, a socket where something had once pulsed with divine power. Now it was empty. Now he felt it again. The eye. His stolen heart. It had been touched. Bones around him trembled. Thousands of desiccated corpses buried with him awoke. They screamed silently, rising from alcoves and catacombs, servants, concubines, archivists, all bound in death to the Collector's will. Pharun'tep's voice tore through the desert on a wind that reeked of embalming oils and rot. Who breaks my vault? Who carries my vision? Back at the ridge, Theodoric dropped the relic as his vision darkened. A psychic shockwave slammed into his skull, forcing him to his knees, vomiting blood onto the sand. Lucretia screamed behind him, blood leaking from her ears. The 3 remaining mercenaries did not survive the awakening. Their bodies went rigid, eyes bulging, hands trembling as veins blackened. One of them burst like an overripe fruit, skin boiling from the inside as his organs sloughed out in a wet cascade. Another drew his sword and began carving strange glyphs into his own chest, laughing in tongues he had never learned. The last simply collapsed, his flesh turning to gold as he hit the ground, mummifying in seconds, an offering given without consent. Theodoric felt the presence flood into the world, massive, ancient, endless. The sky turned the color of rusted brass. Lightning, gold and jagged, split the clouds, and from the distant dunes the wind began to change direction. Something was coming. Theodoric forced himself upright, hands shaking as he rewrapped the relic, his blood soaking the cloth. "We have to go," he gasped. "We walk him. We walk the Collector." Lucretia's voice was distant, stunned. "You felt it too?" "I saw him. He's not sleeping anymore. He knows I touched it. He's coming." As night fell, the stars vanished behind a dome of swirling sand and black wind. Somewhere in the distance, a massive structure, part pyramid, part temple, all wrong, began to rise from the sand as if vomited from the earth itself. The Collector was building his court again, and the old world was now on his list. Chapter 6. Escape from the Dust. The storm hit like a god's scream. Theodoric Halbrecht didn't hear the wind until it was already upon them, an unholy roar barreling down the desert like a charging juggernaut of corn. One moment the night was still, save for the groan of shifting sand under the weight of rising power. The next, it exploded with a concussive blast that hurled him and Lucretia through the air like dolls. Sand tore at them, not in grains but in fistfuls, each gust like a barrage of glass shards. It raked skin, ripped at flesh, filled nostrils and eyes. Theodoric tumbled down the ridge, coughing blood, his satchel torn from his shoulder. He landed hard, something in his arm cracking like dry timber, pain exploding through his vision in a kaleidoscope of white and red. He rolled to a stop, coughing and screaming as sand tried to bury him alive. A shape stumbled into view. Lucretia, one eye swollen shut, her left arm hanging uselessly at her side, soaked in blood. She knelt beside him, dragging him upright. Her voice was barely a rasp in the shrieking wind. "We have to move, they're rising." Theodoric blinked, dazed, his arm limp. "The relic? Where's—" "There," she shouted, pointing through the storm. 50 paces away, the iron-bound satchel flapped half open, golden light spilling out like a heartbeat trapped in flesh. The relic lay on the ground beside it, split. The blast had fractured it clean in two, revealing a crystalline core beneath the golden shell. Theodoric felt a part of himself tear with it. Then came the screaming. Not from his throat, but from below. The ground ruptured. Dry fingers clawed upward from beneath the sand, dozens of them, then hundreds, skeletal limbs wrapped in tattered silk and bronze bands, dragging corpses into the storm. Eyes like blue lanterns flared in skulls, and with each flash of lightning, more of them surged forth. Skeletal warriors, jackal-headed Ushabti, vulture things with bone talons and exposed spinal cords. They emerged as if vomited from the desert itself. They had come for the relic, and for the thieves who touched it. Lucretia fired blind into the storm, muzzle flashes briefly illuminating monstrous forms. An animated charioteer with his lower body fused into bone wheels. A serpent-headed priest that slithered through the air on invisible currents. A giant skeletal beast stitched from mummified crocodiles, bearing a throne of gold on its back. Theodric staggered toward the relic, cradling his shattered arm. A skeletal hound lunged at him, its mouth a gnashing mass of obsidian teeth. Lucretia stepped between them, plunging a long dagger through its eye socket, ripping down through its skull with a wet crack. Bone shards flew, and she kicked the corpse aside. They reached the relic together. Theodric fell to his knees, fumbling with the fragments. One half burned to the touch, molten with the heat of awakening. But he didn't care. He stuffed the larger fragment into a leather pouch at his belt. The smaller half he barely touched before something tore it from his hands. Whip of gold and sinew wrapped around it, ripping it upward into the hand of a descending figure. He was massive, floating just above the sand. His robes were stitched from temple flags, his body a golden ruin of bones fused with sacred metals, and his face. His face was no longer human. Theodric felt his soul shudder. Pharun'tep the Gilded Collector. Eyes like twin comets burned in his sockets. The stolen half of the relic floated in his clawed hand. He regarded Theodric not with hatred, but with curiosity, like a man puzzled over an imperfect trinket. "You are not worthy," the Tomb King rasped. His voice was layered, thousand-year echoes bleeding over one another. "You steal half my heart and think to escape my gaze?" Theodric tried to move, but Pharun'tep raised one hand. A wave of force slammed into him, flinging him across the sand like a broken doll. He hit the ground hard, skidding into a dune. Lucretia screamed and charged. It was suicidal, beautiful, and doomed. She fired both pistols point-blank into Pharun'tep's chest. The bullets evaporated mid-air. She lunged with both daggers, aiming for his throat. He caught her mid-swing. Her body froze, muscles locking, and golden fire surged from his palm into her skull. Her skin split down the middle of her face, blood boiling away in rivulets of steam. Her eyes exploded, and yet she didn't fall. Just twitched, mouth open in a silent scream as she burned from the inside out. Then he dropped her, a smoldering husk of charred meat and metal. "Collector?" Theodric croaked from the sand, bleeding, half-conscious, the remaining half of the relic pulsing against his side. You can't have all of it." Pharun'tep turned slowly toward him, the wind parting around his form. "Not yet," he said. "But I will." And then the Tomb King vanished, consumed by a vortex of dust and screaming souls, retreating into the storm like the eye of a dying god. Theodric didn't remember crawling, didn't remember screaming as he used his good arm to drag himself across miles of sand. He didn't recall when the storm stopped, or when the undead stopped chasing him. Only the weight of the half-relic against his ribs, still pulsing, still warm, and the sound of a voice buried deep inside his skull. Soon. Chapter 7. Pharun'tep's Return. The desert changed. Where once the dunes rolled endlessly under the sun's merciless glare, now they shifted with purpose, like a vast, slow-breathing creature had begun to stir beneath the surface. Winds carried whispers of forgotten names, and the bones of beasts that had lain buried for millennia clawed their way back to the surface under an unseen command. At the heart of the upheaval, the necropolis rose again. It began with a single spire, obsidian and gold, erupting from the sand with a groan like the death rattle of a world. Then others followed, towers carved from bleached limestone, temples crusted in turquoise and brass, statues with jackal skulls and serpent coils. From below, massive stone blocks levitated into position, guided by spectral masons, phantoms of long-dead engineers enslaved by will alone. Pharun'tep the Gilded Collector had returned, and he was building his gallery. In the central sanctum, beneath a vault of star metal that shimmered with images of dying suns and coiled serpents, the Tomb King sat upon a throne of fused skulls and relics. His form shimmered with unholy majesty, robes trailing mist and crushed jewels, arms etched with scripture and blood-forged gold. His ribs, once empty, were now laced with silver roots forming a mock heart chamber where half the sun heart pulsed like a dying star. But it was not enough. He needed more. His mind, once slow and slumbering, now burned with fury and obsession. Every breath he didn't take whispered of incompletion. The relic was fractured, his dominion incomplete. The gilded vault, the collection of wonders, horrors, and divine artifacts he had amassed in life, was still fragmented. Time and death had stolen it from him, so now he would reclaim. His lieutenants came to him like summoned dreams. Captain Reshep, once a highborn prince of Lamia, now a white lord fused into the remains of a golden lion chariot, dragged himself forward with clawed limbs, his voice wet and hollow. The scouts report ruins of a slan vault near the Sapphire Coast. The glyphs speak of a god egg wrapped in starlight. Pharun'tep nodded. Take it. Burn the coast. Reshep bowed and retreated into shadow. Mistress Serket, former high priestess of Pra, her form now a serpent-bodied horror with 6 arms and a helm carved from obsidian, coiled before the throne. A vampire coven hides a relic of the jade moon beneath Sylvania. Their blood priests call it the Orb of Echoing Souls. Pharun'tep's voice echoed through the chamber like grinding stone. They shall not miss it. But bring their high priest intact. I will add his tongue to my choir. In the mortuary choir, dozens of bound souls, each entombed within mechanical throats, singers of agony, whose laments echoed through the court and shaped the magic that rebuilt it. Farun'tep conducted them nightly, their wails controlling the tempo of his expanding dominion. He did not only seek objects, he sought beings, creatures of uniqueness, lives deemed exotic or divine. A 2-headed griffin born of a chaos-touched egg. A druid whose eyes could turn men to ash. A mute assassin whose soul had never known fear, all captured, embalmed alive, and displayed in his vault of living oddities, suspended in magical stasis, posed in twisted artifice, their minds screaming within. For Farun'tep did not kill for sport. He preserved. Election. Curation. Eternal worship of uniqueness, so that all the world would know what had once been his. In the depths of the rebuilt vault he stood before a massive mural carved during his mortal reign. It depicted a vast army marching across the world, deserts burning, jungles weeping, and cities bowing before a figure who held the sun in one hand and the moon in the other. Him. He traced the mural with his gilded claws, and his jeweled eyes flared. Begin the harvest, he hissed. From beneath the sands, it responded, a machine of impossible age and monstrous scale. A crawling pyramid with legs of petrified bone and wheels forged from extinct god metal. A death engine, older than memory itself, long buried but now awakened by Pharun'tep's will. The necrosphinx, basilica. It rose like a mountain given hunger, thrumming with necromantic power. Inside, rows of sarcophagi split open. Warriors whose souls had been stitched into their own bones howled silently and marched. Constructs of bone, gold, and enchanted jade were rolled out of stasis chambers, tomb scorpions the size of siege towers. Ushabti fused with demon-bound armor, giant Anubian statues that breathed black fire. Pharun'tep raised both hands. "I will have my vault reborn," he declared. "From Lustria to Sylvania, from the silver gates of Ultuan to the volcanic slag of the Darklands, every artifact, every being of worth is mine." The choir sang louder, and the sands opened. The legions began to march. Chapter 8. Back in the Empire, Altdorf's towers rose like blackened needles against the winter sky, but Theodoric Halbrecht felt no warmth in their familiar silhouette. The capital of the Empire, bustling and noble, stank of horse piss, coal smoke, and the wet stink of too many lives packed into stone. Yet compared to Nehekhara, it might as well have been a dream, or perhaps a delusion. Theodoric arrived by river barge, under a gray morning drizzle, wrapped in a tattered cloak, his body gaunt and pale. The left side of his face was wrapped in blood-soaked gauze, the eye beneath haunted, sunken. His arm, once shattered by the collector's power, was now bound tightly in alchemical wrappings that smoked slightly in the cold. He hadn't spoken during the entire 3-week journey. Not since Lucretia burned. Not since the collector whispered his name from a world of dust and hunger. He returned to Altdorf in silence, disembarking like a ghost, ignoring the dockmaster's bark demands for paperwork. He disappeared into the cobbled maze of the lower district, weaving between market stalls and spitting gutters, clutching the satchel that held the remaining half of the Sunheart. No one recognized him, not even when he finally stumbled through the rusted gates of Altdorf University. The guards moved to intercept until he raised his head, and one gasped, recognizing the infamous rogue scholar. "Sigmar's breath. Professor Halbrecht?" He didn't respond. They found him hours later in his old lecture hall, sitting in the dust on the floor, staring at the chalkboard as if it might open like a portal. He hadn't lit the lamps. His breath formed ghosts in the chill. That night, the dreams began again. He stood before a massive vault door, its surface etched with screaming faces, each mouth agape in perpetual agony. His hands were soaked in blood, not his own, and in his right palm he held the fractured relic. From the shadows behind him, Pharun'tep spoke. Not in words, but in memories, alien and seething, poured into Theodoric's brain like boiling oil. He saw a library where knowledge bled, scrolls stitched from skin, statues of gods no man should worship, rows upon rows of vitrified humans suspended in glass jars, their eyes blinking slowly, their mouths stitched shut with golden wire. And always, always, the voice, "You carry what is mine. You belong to the vault now." Theodoric awoke screaming, drenched in sweat and blood, the half-relic glowing faintly beneath his cot. He clutched his skull as his nose bled onto the stone. The visions did not stop. By day they bled into waking moments. He would be lecturing to a room of bored students, only to blink and see their skin peel away, revealing dusty, bandaged corpses mouthing silent prayers. On a walk through the university's archives, he turned a corner and saw a skeleton in full Nehekharan regalia, scraping its claws along the floor and whispering his name. He no longer trusted mirrors. They showed him wearing Pharun'tep's crown. Worse still were the collections. He began to notice things. In the alleyways of the city, children with no names were disappearing. Graveyards were unearthed with surgical precision. Private collectors were found dead in their vaults, their artifacts untouched, but their eyes missing, plucked neatly from their skulls and replaced with golden spheres that hummed with internal light. One noble was found skinned alive in his garden, draped over his own marble statue like a cloak. Next to him, a single glyph burned into the grass. Reclaimed. Whispers circulated through the empire of skeletal scouts seen in the border princes, as of entire villages in Estalia vanishing overnight, leaving only sand and broken gold, of strange caravans moving at night, carts filled not with goods, but with sealed crates that wept. The cult of the Golden Asp resurfaced, a death-worshipping sect thought purged 2 generations past. They now operated beneath Altdorf itself, sacrificing beggars and thieves to feed their dreams of ascension and eternal collection. Theodric knew what it meant. Pharun'tep was reaching, and the relic in his possession was the anchor. He tried to destroy it. In the sanctified halls of the Temple of Verena, he placed it upon an anvil of blessed silver and brought down a hammer enchanted with Ethereum. The blow shattered the hammer. The relic remained. He threw it into the river Rake, bound in lead and chained to bricks of stone. It floated. He begged a light wizard to purge it with white flame. The wizard's body exploded in a column of golden fire, and his ashes spelled Theodric's name on the walls. Now, the professor no longer left the university. He spent his days buried in esoteric lore, poring over ancient maps and dream journals, trying to track the relics Pharun'tep was reclaiming. He knew the Tomb King wasn't only hunting objects. He was hunting people, those with bloodlines traced to old pacts, those with knowledge once lost, those deemed unique. And Theodric was at the top of that list. One night, as a thunderstorm raged above Altdorf, Theodric found a package outside his door. A black lacquered box, sealed with bone wax. Inside was Lucretia's dagger, and a golden tag around its hilt, engraved with a single word. Chapter 9. Cult of the Golden Asp. They wore serpents for smiles. The cult of the Golden Asp was no longer a whispered myth in backroom prayer circles or faded pages of inquisitorial records. It throve beneath Altdorf's streets, coiled within the rotting underbelly of the Empire's heart like a serpent waiting for warmth. And warmth had come, in the form of Pharun'tep's awakening. Theodric Halbrek first sensed them when he noticed he was being followed. It started with subtle presences, eyes he could not see, footsteps echoing where there were no feet. Then came the tokens, mummified rats with golden fangs left in his satchel, flies pressed between the pages of his journals, their wings carved with microscopic runes. One morning he found a ring of ash around his bed, and his pillow soaked in warm honey. A gift, a warning. Theodric knew better than to ignore them. He delved into the archives of the witch hunters, bribed corrupt scribes, and studied the forbidden logs of the colleges of magic. The cult of the Golden Asp had been born centuries ago in the ruins of a Nehekharan excavation led by a mad Templar who believed the Tomb Kings were the only true gods of order. Over the generations, the cult fractured, fled underground, and evolved, adopting aspects of both undead necromancy and jungle animism. Now they worshipped Pharun'tep as a god of acquisition, a divine thief of essence. The asp was their symbol, silent, venomous, and always watching. They believed the relic, the fractured sun heart, was the vessel through which Pharun'tep would manifest his divine form. And they wanted it. Badly. The first direct attempt came during a thunderstorm. Theodric was returning from the Sigmarite library, his cloak soaked, the relic fragment wrapped in copper mesh and hidden beneath his tunic. The street lamps flickered as he passed, then went dark. A hiss cut through the rain. He turned and was struck in the face with a chain of bone. Teeth split his cheek as he fell backward, crashing against the cobblestones. Shadows detached themselves from alley walls, figures clad in golden robes, woven with mummified snakes, their faces hidden behind obsidian masks carved into cobra fangs. They moved like dancers, fluid and silent, bearing curved daggers etched with Nehekharan prayers. Theodric drew his pistol and fired, point blank, into one figure's chest. It collapsed with a wet crunch, but no scream came, only a rattling breath as the others closed in. He stabbed another with a silver spike, felt it sink through fabric, cartilage, and something gelatinous. The cultist shrieked in high-pitched Nehekharan, spitting blood into Theodric's face, as a third slammed him into the gutter, pinning him with inhuman strength. The lead figure leaned down, voice low and hungry. "You carry the eye, thief. The asp demands its return. The collector watches your every breath. Let us take the burden." Theodric responded by headbutting the bastard. He felt bone crack beneath the mask before the cultist recoiled. Then came a blaze of light, blue, holy, and searing. The cultist clutching Theodric screamed as his robes caught fire, smoke pouring from his sleeves. A hammer slammed into his chest, and he was thrown backward into a lamppost with a crunch. A witch hunter had arrived. Sergeant Adalric Voss, pale-eyed and iron-faced, stepped into the fray with the fury of a righteous storm. His blessed warhammer, Judgment, glowed with runes that hissed upon contact with cultist flesh. Another cultist lunged. Voss caught her mid-air, drove a stake through her throat, and twisted. Blood, thick and black like tar, sprayed across the stones. "Move," he barked, dragging Theodric to his feet. They fled down side alleys, through ancient storm drains, and into the vaults of the Temple of Sigmar. The chase howled behind them. Cultists hissed through cracks in the stone, whispering Theodric's name like a lover's prayer. Only when they sealed the iron gate with sacred runes did the hissing fade. Inside the vault, panting and bloodied, Theodric looked up at Voss. "They're after the fragment," he wheezed. "They believe it completes the collector." Voss nodded grimly, wiping ichor from his hammer. "They're not wrong." Theodric's skin turned cold. "What?" Voss unrolled a parchment from his coat. It bore a crude map of the known world, with red ink circles drawn over Ulthuan, the Southlands, Sylvania, and Altdorf. "The asp is only one of his hands. There are others, dozens, all collecting, all converging. You've carried his heart too long, Professor. It's changed you, marked you." Theodric stared at his trembling hands. "I can't destroy it." "No," Voss said, "but we can delay him." Later that night, in the deepest cellar beneath the temple, Theodric, in his dream, Pharun'tep stood over a massive altar, and on it lay Theodric, alive, gagged, and naked. Around the altar stood the asp cultists, their masks removed. They had no faces, only open mouths filled with teeth. Pharun'tep leaned close, claws extended. He reached into Theodric's chest, not cutting, not tearing, just passing through, and removed the relic, whole and glowing. Then he smiled, and began sewing Theodric shut, one golden stitch at a time. Chapter 10. Siege of Vissenland. It began with silence. The kind of unnatural stillness that makes dogs whimper and birds fall dead from the sky. Vissenland, proud border town of the Empire, nestled between jagged hills and the River Sol, woke one autumn morning to find the wind had died. The air hung thick and unmoving, and the sun rose behind a haze of sickly gold, casting long, unnatural shadows. Captain Ernst Kappel, garrison commander, stared out from the battlements and spat. "Something's wrong." The guards agreed. Crows perched on rooftops in unnatural stillness, watching. Horses refused to eat. Children had nightmares of dust pouring from the sky like blood. And then the fog came. Not white, not mist, but a golden shroud that rolled down from the hills like a choking tide. It clung to the skin, smelled of rot and incense. Beneath its veil came a sound, faint at first, then growing louder. Drens, low, ritualistic, unnatural. Then the screaming began. From the outer farms, flames erupted. Scarecrows were torn down and reassembled into grotesque mockeries. Villagers fled toward the gates, but something moved behind them. Something tall and wrong, with too many limbs and gold-plated fangs. Captain Capel ordered the gates shut. They slammed shut just in time for the first wave. Skeletons came in silence, not the shambling dead of Sylvania, but ancient warriors, crowned in tarnished gold, shields etched with Nehekharan curses, spears of obsidian, eyes of sunfire. Behind them rode chariots pulled by mummified lions, their drivers bound in place by strips of human skin, their mouths stretched into smiles by golden hooks. They didn't speak. They didn't shout. They harvested. The defenders of Vissenland fought like demons. Mortars fired into the fog, blowing limbs and bone into the air. Crossbowmen loosed bolt after bolt, and hammers rang as they met cursed steel. But for every undead felled, 5 more came from the mist. Then came the construct. Tomb scorpions, massive clattering things with bladed pincers and carved hieroglyphs along their chitinous backs, erupted from the ground beneath the walls, skewering soldiers on their stingers and dragging them below. One scorpion dragged 3 children screaming into the fog before it vanished, the ground sealing behind it like a closing wound. Capel fought atop the gatehouse, sword red with ichor, rallying his men as a colossus emerged from the smoke, a 20-foot Ushabti war golem clad in temple bronze, carrying a flail made from chained skulls. It spoke as it swung, its voice not from its mouth, but from the wailing souls embedded in its armor. You will serve in the vault eternal. The flail connected with the stone wall. The section exploded. Capel and a dozen soldiers fell, some alive, some not. The gap in the defenses welcomed the tide. Farun'tep arrived at twilight. He did not ride or walk, he floated, borne aloft on a palanquin made from ivory, and crying mortals bound in golden shackles. His body glowed with divine hatred, half the sun heart pulsing in his ribcage like a second sun. Around his throat coiled a living serpent of bone, whispering to him in lost tongues. He raised one claw. The sky split. Golden light bathed the town square, and where it touched flesh, choice vanished. Dozens dropped their weapons and walked toward him, eyes glazed, smiles fixed. They weren't enthralled, they weren't cursed. They were chosen. Collectors walked behind them, hooded cultists robed in flesh, carrying iron cages. One by one, the specimens were bound, tagged, and placed in wagons lined with bone dust. Children, priests, a baker with a third thumb, a blind bard who'd never spoken, unique things. Farun'tep's voice echoed in their minds as they wept. I remember you all. My vault remembers. Captain Capel, bleeding and limping, made his final stand in the Church of Sigmar. He and 20 survivors barricaded the great doors, placing relics of the faith around the altar. The priest, Father Gunter, chanted protection prayers as thunder rumbled. The church held for 20 minutes. Then the stained glass windows exploded inward in a shower of color and bone. A serpent-headed statue slithered through the broken wall, its body a chain of mummified heads stitched end to end. Its breath turned the pews to ash. It opened its mouth, and a swarm of beetles poured out, devouring skin, cloth, and stone. Capel died screaming as they burrowed into his eyes. Father Gunter's voice broke mid-prayer as golden chains wrapped around his throat and dragged him into the mist. When the storm passed, Vissenland was gone. Not destroyed, missing. In its place was a perfect crater, rimmed with bones and gilded sand. At the center, a single statue stood, Captain Capel, rendered in flawless obsidian, his sword raised defiantly. At his feet, a golden plaque read, Specimen, 241, the last defender. And far away, in a vault of endless corridors, Pharun'tep added a fingerbone to his growing collection. Soon, he whispered to the half-heart in his chest. Very soon now. Chapter 11, Council of Fear. The echo of boots on marble filled the chamber of Imperial strategy, a cold cavernous room beneath the Reichsgraf Palace in Altdorf. Its walls were hung with ancient banners, each frayed and fading, each a testament to wars fought and barely survived. Gaslight sconces lined the walls, but even they seemed to flicker with unease tonight, as if the very stones sensed the fear festering within the Empire's ruling elite. Theodric Halbrecht stood near the chamber's rear, half in shadow, bloodshot eyes scanning the room's occupants, dukes, generals, high priests, and wizards of no small power. Every one of them wore faces carved from stone. Every one had heard. Vissenland was gone. Not overrun, not razed. Gone. A crater now yawned where a bustling border city once stood, rimmed in bone dust and molten sand. Not a single survivor. No screams. No refugees. No warning. Just an eerie silence, and a single statue where the captain once stood. The news had reached Altdorf by Raven only 2 days ago. The council had convened by midnight. What, sorry? Spat Count Brandt, fist clenched on the polished table. This reeks of dark elf illusions or sentient trickery. Our scouts could be misled. Vissenland may still stand. No, said Inquisitor Thurn with quiet dread. His left hand twitched as if remembering some past trauma. I have seen this before. In Lamia, centuries past. Tomb King magic. Hieratic sorcery that extracts... Extracts what? Demanded General Ludovic. Buildings don't vanish, cities don't just disappear. Then they do, rasped Master Leontes of the Light College. When the boundary between the mortal realm and the dreaming sands is breached. The room fell silent. Theodric stepped forward, holding the Hath relic cradled in a lead-lined box. The air around it was cold, despite the firelight. He raised his voice, hoarse and hollow. I know who's behind this. Eyes turned, none friendly. He opened the box. A faint golden pulse escaped, bathing the room in a sickly hue. Theodric flinched as it throbbed in his bones. Several council members recoiled instinctively. I stole this from the tomb of Catmacat, he said. Awaken the one buried there. His name is Pharun'tep the Gilded Collector. He was once a king, now something more. He isn't waging war. He's gathering. He views the world as a vault. We're not under siege. We're being curated. Curated, scoffed Count Brandt. This is nonsense. A half-dead desert warlord playing at apocalypse? Vissenland disagrees, Theodric snapped. The light wizard stepped forward, face ashen. There is something inside that relic. A hunger. I can feel it, ancient and intelligent. Theodric pointed a shaking finger across the table. He is not raising armies to conquer. He is selecting people, cities, artifacts, bloodlines, anything he deems rare or exceptional. Vissenland was not destroyed. It was acquired. A mad collector from the sands, hissed the high priest of Sigmar. You expect us to believe that this This ghoul from Nehekhara now walks the empire and plucks our cities like baubles? Yes, Theodric shouted, slamming the table. He knows you. He's already watching this room. You're on his list. Silence. Then laughter, bitter, forced, nervous. Enough, said Ludovic. We convene to discuss a threat, not a lecture in fantastical anthropology. This relic should be destroyed. Theodric's lip curled. Try it. He held up the half-relic. We burned it, buried it, even doused it in holy fire. It floats. It screams. It draws things to it. He marked me with it. If you destroy this, you won't stop him. You'll just blind yourselves. You're dismissed, Professor Halbrecht, Count Brant said coldly. Return to your heresies, and leave war to men who bleed. Theodric stared at them all, fat, robed, armored fools. He saw them now as Pharun'tep might, specimens. Unique, perhaps, but doomed all the same. I warned you, he said, voice flat. When your palaces turn to glass and your sons are catalogued like insects, don't beg for a place in the vault. He turned and walked from the room. Behind him, debate erupted into shouts. Above them all, unseen, a whisper fluttered through the rafters like ash on a breeze. So many voices, so many shelves to fill. Chapter 12. Lizardmen Prophecy. Theodric Halbrecht was not expecting a Saurus emissary to knock politely. The doors to the College of Antiquities exploded inward with a thunderous crash, shards of oak and iron scattering across the marble floor. Theodric spun, half-blind from candlelight, relic half unwrapped in his lap. Behind him, arcane wards hissed as they reacted to the sudden, overwhelming surge of alien presence. The creature that entered ducked beneath the shattered frame, a towering slab of muscle and scaled ritual armor glistening in the rain. Its body shimmered with moisture and blood, fresh from battle. Obsidian plates covered its shoulders and chest, etched with glowing Old One glyphs. Its maw dripped with saliva and incense smoke, and its black eyes scanned the room like a predator selecting prey. Behind it stepped a skink priest, tiny in comparison but radiating searing intelligence. His crest was a brilliant turquoise, and in his clawed hands he bore a scroll wrapped in living vines. Theodric stood slowly. "You're far from Lustria," he said, voice hoarse. The Saurus let out a deep growl, but the skink spoke, a voice like wind through ancient stone. "You bear the broken eye." Theodric swallowed. "It's called the Sun Heart. It is no heart," the skink interrupted. "It is a key, a shard of the prime alignment. You awaken something that was never meant to be touched." The Saurus stepped forward, the floor groaning under its bulk. Theodric backed away instinctively. The creature stopped inches from him and sniffed the air. "It knows you," the skink hissed. "You stink of the collector. Your soul is stamped." Theodric opened the box, revealing the fractured relic. The moment it was exposed, the skink recoiled, and the Saros snarled, taking a defensive posture. The relic pulsed once, brighter than ever. "It calls the stars," said the skink, "and it is being answered." He unrolled the scroll. It was not inked, but grown, vines forming runes, glyphs living and shifting. As Theodric watched, they formed images: the twin-headed serpent of the Great Plan, the spiraling galaxies of the Old Ones, and beneath them, Farun'tep, rising from a throne built from bones and suns, his chest an open gate to the void. The skink touched a glyph that shimmered gold. "The collector was not born of Nehekhara," he whispered. "He is a flawed echo, a priest-king who dared to steal fragments of the Great Alignment, merging lizardmen relics with tomb magics. The vault you opened was not his prison. It was a containment. He is a mutation in the great plan. He should never have been. Theodric stared, lips dry. What does he want? The skink looked up at him. Perfection. The Old Ones catalogued all things. Farun'tep wishes to do the same, but he is not a scribe. He is a hoarder, a desecrator. The Saurus growled again, and the relic responded, emitting a low hum, harmonic and wrong. Dust fell from the ceiling. This is building a cosmic vault, said the skink, one that pierces planes. If he completes it, he will anchor himself into the great weave. He will become part of the plan, not as intended, but by force. Theodric fell back into his chair, trembling. How do we stop him? The skink walked forward slowly. You cannot destroy the eye, but you can close it. We need the other half, the one he holds. With both pieces we may relock the prime seal and sever him from the alignment. And if we fail? Theodric asked. The skink tilted his head. Then Pharun'tep will not merely conquer the world. He will collect it, fold it, display it in time. He stepped forward again, gently placing a clawed hand on Theodric's chest. You are bound now. We cannot touch the relic. You must carry it. The Saurus leaned down, its breath hot and wet. But if you falter, we will unmake you. Theodric nodded slowly. Do you happen? I understand. Thunder cracked overhead, and in the sky above Altdorf the stars began to shift, realigning ever so subtly. The vault had opened a crack wider. Chapter 13. Allies in the Jungle. The jungle greeted them with claws. From the moment Theodric Halbrecht set foot on Lustrian soil, he was swallowed by a world that loathed intruders. The canopy blotted out the sun, choking the sky in a green dripping darkness where leaves oozed sap like blood and vines coiled with sentient malice. Every step was a struggle, roots that grasped ankles, insects that fed on flesh, and creatures that screamed in the night like tortured souls. But the lizardmen moved like shadows. Theodric's Saurus bodyguard Zartok hewed through the undergrowth with his moonblade, a serrated obsidian cleaver etched with Old One sigils. Behind him glided Chakla, the skink priest whose eyes saw through both time and shadow. Around them, the jungle fell silent in reverence or fear. They had traveled 3 days from the temple city of Exhatle, deeper into territory corrupted by human greed and Nehekharan heresy. The cultists had fled here with the second fragment of the Sunheart, recovered after Pharun'tep's assault on Vissenland, and smuggled south by a splinter faction of the cult of the Golden Asp. Their trail was thick with blood and desecration. On the 4th day, they found the first altar. It was a mockery of the Old Ones. Built from shattered slan relics, its surface was smeared with black wax, and human bones formed a spiral around it. At its center lay a dead skink, flayed and ranged like a blooming flower. His eyes had been replaced with tiny sunstone orbs that wept golden ichor. Chakla hissed and bent low, muttering a death rite. Zartok growled, jaw clenched, the air thick with the scent of rage. They are trying to awaken it, Chakla said, using sacrifices to simulate the relic's pulse. Theodric stepped closer. How long ago? Hours, the skink answered, wiping blood from the altar with reverent claws. They are ahead, but not far. By sunset, they reached the ruins of an ancient spawning pool, once sacred, now defiled. The cultists had made camp within the overgrown ziggurat, ringed in warding symbols scrawled in feces and blood. Fires burned with green flame and chants echoed from the shattered halls within, sibilant, low, and pulsing with the same rhythm as the broken Sunheart. Theodric peered from the ferns. They're trying to activate it without both halves, That's suicide. Chakla's eyes gleamed. Then let them bleed. Xyratop led the charge. He erupted from the underbrush with a roar that shook the trees, cleaving through the nearest cultist before the man could scream. His blade split skull and chest in a single swing, spraying bone and steaming gore in a wide arc. From the ruins, panic erupted. Masked figures scrambled to form a defense, men and women clad in sun-gold robes, faces carved with sigils, arms fused with strange metals. Some carried blades, others raised staves, and spoke words that curdled the air. Theodric raised his pistol and fired into one priest's chest. The shot exploded in a bloom of fire and blood. Another cultist screamed as Chakla summoned a wave of emerald light, dissolving his skin and leaving only twitching sinew and hollow bones. But the cult had defenses of its own. From the ziggurat's mouth poured horrors, reanimated reptiles with too many eyes, fused with human torsos, mouths sewn shut with gold thread. They moved like beasts, howling through stunted lungs. Leapt at Theodric. He ducked just in time, the creature's claws raking the tree beside him, gouging bark like paper. He rolled, drew his dagger, and plunged it upward into the creature's jaw. It spasmed, vomited black ichor, and collapsed. Zartok met the next wave alone, facing down 3 cult guardians clad in serpent-scale armor. Their blades hissed with enchantments. One lunged, slicing deep into Zartok's side. The sorceress bellowed and ripped the man in half with his bare claws, spine snapping like wet twigs. Blood sprayed across the moss. Inside the ziggurat, the main altar pulsed, runes glowing as the stolen relic fragment hovered above it, suspended in a lattice of bones and tendons. A high priest, cloaked in living snakes, chanted with rising fervor, "Collector of sons, Vault King, show us your gaze." Theodric pushed through the melee, pistol empty, dagger clenched. He reached the altar as the relic began to spin. "Stop!" he screamed. Too late. The fragment flared. A blast of golden light erupted outward, flinging Theodric into a stone wall. Cultists were reduced to ash mid-sentence. One guardian exploded, his flesh boiling away. The high priest stared skyward, arms outstretched in joy. And then his body imploded, sucked inward as the fragment absorbed him. His bones folded in on themselves, and his last scream was cut off with a sickening pop. Then silence. The relic floated, spinning, unstable. A portal shimmered faintly in the air, showing rows of vaults, shadows moving behind crystal, and eyes, so many eyes, watching from the darkness. Then it dimmed. The portal snapped shut. The fragment fell. Theodric crawled forward, hand shaking, and took the shard. It was still warm, still pulsing. Chakla stepped beside him, voice heavy with awe. "The vault. We saw it." Theodric nodded, breath shallow. "We have to finish this." Zartok stood atop the ziggurat, dripping blood, surrounded by corpses. Beneath him, the jungle breathed, and far away, something stirred in answer. Chapter 14. Ruins of Exhatle. The ruins of Exhatle were not dead. They were dormant, a slumbering beast of stone and prophecy, buried beneath layers of time, blood, and secrets. Theodric Halbreth felt it the moment he stepped into the sunken plaza. The very air shivered. The ground beneath his boots pulsed faintly, as though the jungle heart still beat below. Exhatle had once been a great temple city, a bastion of the Old One's divine plan, ruled by Slan of immense power. Now its temples were cracked and overgrown, strangled by centuries of encroaching jungle. Great stone ziggurats wept moss and lichen. Marble serpents had shattered into headless piles. But the glyphs remained, burning faintly in the dimming light like old embers refusing to die. Theodric knelt beside one of the monoliths, brushing moss from the carved surface. The glyphs here were different, curved and elegant, but interwoven with a sharper, crueler script. He looked up at Exhatle, the skink priest. This one says containment, but the next, it's Nehekharan, consumption. Exhatle hissed, his crest flattening. Here, the plan failed. The collector corrupted the gate. Zartok grunted behind them, greatsword resting against his shoulder. They were not alone in the ruins. Something watched. Theodric could feel it. The shadows clung too tightly. The wind carried words instead of rustles. The jungle had not claimed this place entirely for one reason. It was still active. At the heart of Exhatle lay the Vault Temple, a spiraling step pyramid that defied geometry. No path up was ever the same. Each stair seemed to shift when not watched. Theodric and the others ascended only with Exhatle's guidance, and even then the stone trembled with each step as though protesting their intrusion. The summit held a basin, an obsidian circle inlaid with precious stones, its rim carved with scenes of cosmic warfare. Lizardmen waged battle not against orcs or skaven, but stars, tentacled horrors and suns with fanged mouths. In the center of the basin was a lock, a sun-shaped depression lined with ancient metal, humming softly. Theodric stepped forward. He drew both halves of the relic from his satchel. Their glow intensified immediately. As he brought them close, they began to tremble in his hands, shards no longer fractured but attracted, as if eager to reunite. When the pieces touched, they merged with a hiss of boiling air. A surge of force knocked Theodric backward. Zartok caught him before he fell. The disc pulsed once, then slotted into the basin with a deep, grinding click. The basin lit up in brilliant gold. Glyphs raced along the temple walls. The pyramid shuddered. From the jungle below came the sound of trees snapping and birds shrieking. The sky turned violet. A column of light erupted upward, pure, blinding and silent, and through it visions flooded their minds. An ancient weapon. Not one of destruction, but of redirection. A cosmic key designed to close gateways, sever souls, and imprison entities outside the plan. A failsafe, built when even the old ones feared they had birthed too much. Theodric gasped, clutching his temples. Images scalded his mind. A portal of obsidian rings hovering above an ocean of stars. A crystal vault containing not bodies, but universes, and Farun'tep standing before it, trying to force it open with the relic. "He'll want it to turn the key," Theodric whispered. "He doesn't understand. He thinks it's a treasure vault." Exhatle nodded gravely. "But it is a seal, one he must never open." Beneath them the pyramid roared. Stone groaned, splitting open as the vault temple's core unfolded like a blooming sun. Hidden beneath the summit was a spherical chamber, its walls lined with ancient metal and glowing nodes pulsing slowly, like the breathing of a sleeping god. Hovering at the center was the great lock, a floating obelisk ringed in concentric circles, each lined with glyphs of unimaginable complexity. And within it, a sphere of nothingness, a void imprisoned in motion. Theodric fell to his knees. "It's not a weapon. It's a cosmic shudder. It can seal Farun'tep forever, trap him in the Collector's vault where he belongs. But only if aligned," Exhatle warned. "To turn the key, one must be seen by the great machine." Theodric looked up, his face pale. "And what does it see?" Exhatle answered with a whisper. "Worthy targets, those marked by the Collector." The ground shook again. From the jungle below, horns sounded, long wailing notes like funerary calls. Pharun'tep had sensed the relic's use. He was coming. Theodric stood, heart pounding, eyes on the sphere. "We have the key." Zartok raised his blade, his voice a growl. "Now we buy time to use it." Chapter 15. In the Hands of the Dead. Theodric Hallbreck saw it coming in his dreams. He was back in the vault, Pharun'tep's vault, not in body but in soul. He stood on an endless marble platform surrounded by floating cells of crystal and bone. Each cell contained a life, a child frozen mid-scream, a god-beast with its heart carved out, a priest begging with eyeless sockets. Their agony was soundless, perfect. In the center stood the collector. Farun'tep extended his gilded claw, and Theodric, helpless, handed over the relic. When he woke, the jungle burned. Exhatle was gone, not destroyed, not conquered, collected. The vault key gone, the lock closed, the temple shattered into black dust. Theodric's head throbbed, his ears bled. Exhatle lay crushed beneath a fallen column, his massive body still twitching. Chakla was missing. In the sky above the smoldering ruins, a chariot of bone spiraled, drawn by 3 undead feathered serpents, wings stitched from scrolls and flayed skin. Upon it stood him, Pharun'tep the Gilded Collector, risen to full godhood in golden light. The completed relic floated before him, spinning in sacred arcs. Farun'tep raised his arms, and the air bled. Above the jungle, the sky cracked. Not metaphorically, literally. A jagged fissure tore through the clouds and stars, revealing a void of spinning ether. Winds howled. Trees split and were pulled into the air like feathers. The sun itself dimmed. The great vortex loomed beyond the crack, a swirling storm of raw magic and collapsed timelines, sealed by the old ones to regulate the winds of magic. It was not meant to be opened. It was not a door. It was a plug. Farun'tep intended to uncork it. Atop a rising dais of jade and bone, surrounded by phalanxes of undead priests, he held the relic in both hands, its rings aligned. The glyphs upon it glowed with a brilliance so intense it left after images in the air. "The vault will become reality," he intoned, voice layered with thousands of enslaved echoes. "Let the vortex crack and the weave unravel. Let all that is unique be preserved. Let the world be mine." The ground responded. Entire cliffs fractured, rivers boiled. Ghosts erupted from old graves and screamed as they were pulled into the sky, twisted into scrolls, coins, and ornaments. Villages across the continent awoke to find entire bloodlines erased, their ancestors plucked from history and placed in the collector's cosmic gallery. Pharun'tep began the ritual. His priests chanted in Nehekhara and Old One dialects. Eyes glazed, bleeding gold from their mouths. One by one, they collapsed, as their souls were consumed to fuel the alignment. From the fissure above, tendrils of the vortex descended, pure energy, impossible to look at. They wrapped around the relic like vines around prey. The vortex responded with a pulse that shattered mountains. The collector laughed, an awful sound of joy and hunger. And Theodric, bloodied, bruised, barely alive, watched from a ledge far below, his hands shaking with rage and grief. He had failed. He had brought the key to the lock, and the lock had been stolen. But as Pharun'tep's laughter echoed across the skies, Theodric felt something else stir inside him. The memory of resistance. Zartok's final breath. Chakla's vanished form. Lucretia's dagger, now tucked at his side, still stained with sacrificial blood. He could still act. The ritual had begun, but it had not finished. And if Pharun'tep intended to tear open the vortex, then Theodric would make damn sure he choked on it. Chapter 16. Assault on the Vault. It began with thunder, not from the sky but from the earth itself. The jungle shook as the pyramid city of Pharun'tep emerged in full. What once was a ruin in the heart of Lustria had become a monolithic sanctum of madness, a tiered ziggurat larger than any living city, composed of bone, obsidian, and the liquefied remains of ancient artifacts. Each tier hummed with necrotic power. Glyphs carved from flayed gold ran with molten essence down the sides, like tears from a weeping god. Massive statues of the Collector loomed from every corner, each bearing a captured soul within its jeweled eyes. Above the pyramid hovered the open fissure to the great vortex, widening each day, tearing at the fabric of the world. Its winds howled with unborn screams and the thunderous sobbing of realities undone. And yet, from every corner of the old world they came, the last hope of the living, a coalition. At its head rode Field Marshal Odric von Keller, banner of the Empire snapping in the air, atop a barded griffin wreathed in divine steel. Cannon lines, steam tanks, and batteries of halberdiers moved behind him, each bearing runes of anti-undead blessing. To his right rode Dame Elaine du Montfort, the lance of Exhatle Lauren, leading the Bretonnian charge on a white destrier glowing with Athelric light. Her knights' lances burned with holy fire, and their armor bore the scars of 5 crusades. From the jungle shadows rose the third force, Lizardmen, Saurus warriors in obsidian armor, silent as death. Stegodons bearing engines of the gods, skinks with lightning wands forged from star metal. At the front walked Mazta Kui, a Croxagore covered in celestial glyphs, dragging behind him a war totem pulsing with Old One wrath. At the rear, battered but unbroken, stood Theodric Halbrecht, wrapped in stolen Lizardmen relics and Empire steel, eyes burning with obsession and vengeance. At his belt, a glowing dagger and 3 crystal vials containing raw fragments of the vortex's breach. He would not fight with steel, but with truth and blood. They reached the base of the pyramid as the final star turned black. From its summit, Farun'tep emerged, cloaked in solar flame, ribcage open to reveal the fully assembled Sunheart, now fused with his soul. He no longer floated. He hovered, a distortion of light and time. His voice echoed without speaking. "Welcome to my gallery." He raised a hand. The first wave of undead struck like a tidal wave. From every tier of the pyramid poured horrors. Mummified Saurus, reanimated with golden joints and bronze fangs. Bretonnian paladins twisted into screaming centaurs of bone and iron. Doom scorpions the size of mansions, dragging corpse-filled cages on their backs. The jungle floor exploded. The lines of the living met them head-on. Bretonnian knights charged, their lances shattering bone and brass in showers of light. Each strike accompanied by the cry of a warhawk or the whisper of a forest god. Dame Elaine skewered a skeletal priest and rode through its chest as it erupted into dust. Empire steam tanks opened fire, cannonballs forged from holy silver smashing into the pyramid's defenses. Witch hunters ignited magical mines that sent entire phalanxes of the dead hurtling skyward in flaming pieces. The lizardmen surged in silence. Zartok's Savaidenkin threw themselves into the melee, blades singing with celestial energy. A Slan mage priest appeared atop a levitating dais, raining comets from his mind, tearing skeletal constructs into powder with a thought. Theodric ran. He did not fight. His mission was deeper. Through the chaos he sprinted, ducking falling masonry, dodging animated corpses. Beside him ran a skink attendant bearing the final seal, a scroll soaked in sun venom ink that could disrupt the relic's alignment. They entered the pyramid's heart. There, beneath the chamber of the vault, was the reliquary of essence, where Pharun'tep stored the most prized of his living artifacts. Theodric saw rows of sarcophagi filled with breathing victims, conscious, bound in liquid crystal. He saw Lucretia, still alive, though skinless, her nerves flickering beneath transparent bindings. She locked eyes with him, her lips moved. "Burn it all." He opened the first vial. Raw magic screamed. Farun'tep felt it instantly. From the pyramid's apex, he abandoned the battle and descended like a god. Walls fractured, time slowed. Theodric watched as air turned to gold, stones to memory. The collector appeared before him, face wreathed in divine terror. "You dare ruin my vault?" "I'm not here to ruin it," Theodoric growled. "I'm here to empty it." He opened the second vial. Reality fractured. The relic pulsed. Above, the pyramid buckled, its runes shattered. The sun heart began to shake in Pharun'tep's chest. From the battlefield below, Pharun'tep's minions froze, screaming in agony as their bindings unraveled. Knights drove through them like lightning. Lizards tore open war golems with tooth and blade. The tide turned. Theodra pulled the final seal. "You forgot something, Collector." Pharun'tep lunged. Too late. The seal shattered. The vortex's tendrils slammed into the pyramid's heart. The vault began to implode, and the world held its breath. Chapter 17. Battle of Bone and Gold. The world screamed. The sky above the jungle churned like boiling pitch, split down its center by the gaping wound of the great vortex. Etheric lightning lashed the heavens. The trees surrounding the collector's pyramid city wilted and blackened, their roots clawing at the stone as if trying to flee. Rivers reversed. Birds fell from the sky mid-flight, frozen in time. Atop the crumbling ziggurat, Pharun'tep the Gilded Collector stood as a god reborn, his body blazing with golden fire, his ribcage open like a shrine, and the completed sun heart spinning within. The vortex responded to it like a lover's touch, spiraling wider, hungrier. Below, the battle of bone and gold erupted in full. The Empire's lines advanced across blood-slick stone, halberdiers screaming war cries as they met skeletal legions of Nehekharan elites. Steam tanks crushed sarcophagi underfoot. Witch hunters wielded blessed powder and fire to scatter wraiths like chaff. One unleashed a relic bomb that vaporized 100 corpses in a white-hot shockwave, only to be ripped apart by spectral jackals seconds later. The Bretonnian vanguard drove in from the west. Knights of the Grail thundered through the ash-laden air, their lances coated in flame and virtue. Dame Elaine impaled a chariot-riding high priest, dragging him across the stones until he exploded in a scream of emerald fire. Her horse was slain beneath her, but she rose, blood slick and radiant, slashing with a relic blade that sang with the voices of saints. The lizardmen surged up the flanks. Croxagores smashed through undead monstrosities. Bastiladons unleashed solar blasts that melted the faces of crypt constructs. One ancient stegodon crashed into a war goat made of human femurs and bronze teeth, and the resulting explosion collapsed half a pyramid tier. And in the heart of it all, Theodric Halbrecht ran for the portal. The stairs crumbled around him as he ascended. Bone scorpions swarmed, clicking and hissing. One lashed out with a venom-tipped pincer. He ducked, rolled, and drove a shard of lizardmen crystal through its thorax. The creature convulsed and shattered like brittle stone. He climbed higher. The wind screamed with incorporeal voices. Sand and gold lashed his skin. Behind him the relic vibrated against his chest, half a key, half a curse. He reached the summit, half blind and bleeding. And there he saw him, Farun'tep, wreathed in raw sorcery, his arms extended to the heavens, mouth open in silent chant. Light poured from the vortex into his body, wrapping around the sun heart, feeding it. The glyphs on his armor shifted with every syllable. rearranging reality like a madman rewriting the world's script. "You cannot stop this," the collector bellowed, without turning. "I am archivist to the stars. This is the moment I am entitled to." Theodric screamed back, voice hoarse and cracking. "You're a thief, a tomb robber in a god's robe." Farun'tep turned. His eyes burned with captured suns. His face, once mummified, now shimmered with molten gold. "Then let this be my final acquisition." He raised a hand, and Theodric was lifted from the ground, bones cracking, blood pouring from his nose and ears. The relic throbbed wildly, its pieces vibrating, threatening to tear him apart. But he clutched the Lizardmen scroll tighter, the spell Chakla had given him before the final assault. A fragment of the Old One's script. A command not to open, but to reverse. Through blurred vision he began to chant. The glyphs glowed. Farun'tep staggered. "No," he snarled, lowering his hand. "That script is forbidden." Theodric kept chanting. The sunheart spun faster, then slowed. Its light dimmed. The glyphs on Farun'tep's chest began to flake away like dried scabs. The vortex shrank, its edge twitching with resistance. The pyramid cracked beneath them. Theodric finished the incantation and threw the relic into the vortex. There was silence. Then, detonation. The vortex screamed as the relic struck it like a hammer to glass. Fractures spiderwebbed across reality. Farun'tep howled as half his body imploded in golden fire, ribs turning to ash, his scream echoing into every timeline he tried to conquer. The energy slammed into Theodric. He fell, blinded, burning, ribs shattered, tumbling down the collapsing stairs as the pyramid began to fold inward. Not collapse, but deconstruct. Every tile, relic, and fragment, returning to the weave from which it was stolen. Across the battlefield, undead warriors froze, then cracked like old porcelain. Constructs crumbled. Ghosts were sucked upward into the retreating vortex like smoke in reverse, and at last the vault itself collapsed into a single point of golden light, then vanished. Silence returned. Smoke billowed from every corner of the ruined pyramid city. Fires burned in smoldering piles of armor and bone. Bodies littered the stones. Human, reptilian, monstrous. Theodric lay still, blood pooling beneath him, ribs exposed, vision blurred. From the mist, a figure emerged. Chakla. His crest was burned, robes torn, but he knelt beside Theodric and whispered, "You closed the vault." Theodric coughed blood, eyes barely open. "Did I?" "Stop him." The skink nodded. "For now." And above them, the vortex sealed itself once more, with a sound like weeping stars. Chapter 18. Whispers in the Sand. The desert remembered. Long after the pyramid city had crumbled into ash and time-worn rubble, the sands of Nehekhara stirred again, restless beneath the moon. No banners flew. No undead legions marched. But the wind carried voices, soft, endless, echoing chants from a throat long destroyed. The collector's voice. He was not gone. He was fragmented. In a tomb somewhere near the Scorpion coast, a digger's pick struck something solid. He dropped to his knees, brushing away layers of ancient dust. Beneath, half buried in bone-white sand, lay a shard of the sun-heart, blackened, cracked, but pulsing. His hand hovered over it, and the whisper came, "You are interesting." His screen did not reach the surface. Across the world, other pieces stirred. In the catacombs of Sylvania, beneath the ruined chapel of Moor, a fragment bled golden ichor from a broken sarcophagus. A necromancer discovered it while scavenging for reagents. When he picked it up, his mind burned with images of stasis vaults, of preserved lives, of creatures on display before unseen gods. He laughed for hours, then slit his own throat and wrote glyphs across the walls in his own blood. In the frozen mountains near Kadrin, dwarfs unearthed a sliver lodged inside an ancient runestone. It melted their armor on contact, whispering secrets about vaults that held forgotten ancestors, dwarfs erased from time. One slayer touched it and exploded into golden dust, leaving behind a pile of his bones arranged alphabetically. Even in the south, deep in the jungles of Lustria, a feral stegodon unearthed a relic fragment beneath a riverbank and began to bellow day and night, driven mad. The skinks tried to soothe it, but when the moon rose high and full, it stomped through a temple and trampled 12 priests to death, before smashing its own head into a stone wall. Theodric Halbrash knew the relic had not been destroyed. He had seen it shatter. He had thrown it into the great vortex. But its pieces had not vanished. They had been flung, scattered like cursed seeds across the world. Each one retained a sliver of Pharun'tep's will, a pulse of his desire to collect, preserve, control. Now they infected the land. The Empire's College of Light sequestered 3 pieces within lead-bound containment spheres. The wizards tasked with guarding them began to change, obsessively cataloging people, scribbling names in books with no covers, carving inventory numbers into their own arms. One apprentice was found trying to mummify himself alive in the dormitory. In Bretonnia, a relic fragment surfaced beneath the catacombs of Couronne. The chapel above began to decay unnaturally fast. Saints' bones began whispering in dreams. A knight tasked with guarding the relic began mounting the heads of his enemies in glass cases, children included. In the Southlands, a black ark of Naggaroth intercepted a lizardmen caravan bearing a fragment to Itzar. They butchered the guards and took the relic. Days later, the entire ark was found adrift, covered in webs made from preserved tongues and hair. Not a single soul aboard remained alive. Every corpse was embalmed. Everyone was smiling. Whispers in the sand, in the rivers, in the stone. Farun'tep was no longer whole, but in fragments. He had become more insidious. He no longer needed an army. He only needed time and the greed of mortals. And far away, in a forgotten vault beneath the dunes, a new figure stirred. Once a scholar, now half mummified, half possessed, Theodric Halbrecht sat on a throne of broken scrolls and shattered armor. His left eye glowed faintly gold. His fingers constantly moved, writing, cataloging, classifying. A whisper kissed his ears. "You were always meant to be mine." And in his lap lay another fragment, one of many. Chapter 19. The Scholar's Oath. The fire crackled in the small, ruin-laced temple at the edge of the Badlands, its light casting long, dancing shadows over broken idols and shattered frescoes. Theodric Halbrecht sat hunched beside it, swathed in patchwork robes made of jungle silk, empire wool, and lizardmen hide, each piece bearing some forgotten glyph, some sigil of memory. His body bore scars beyond repair. His left arm, now skeletal from shoulder to wrist, moved of its own accord when the moon rose high, fingers twitching in ancient scripts. His left eye no longer blinked, replaced with a golden orb that burned when a relic fragment stirred nearby. His ribs were bound in gold-threaded wrappings, stitched by Chakla's claw before the priest had vanished into the vortex storm. And in his satchel, wrapped in silk soaked in sacred oils, lay 3 fragments of the shattered sun heart. They whispered to him, not in language, but in memories. The cry of a mother seeing her child entombed in crystal, the screech of a dwarf whose name was erased from every ancestor tablet, the moan of a stegodon gutted for the sin of uniqueness. They didn't ask to be remembered. They had been collected. And Theodric, once a man of knowledge, now a relic of his own story, could not let that stand. He lifted the relic fragment with trembling fingers. Its surface shimmered like burning parchment. His fingers blistered. Still he held it close, whispering through gritted teeth, "Pharun'tep is not gone. He is scattered, and so long as a single shard remains, the vault remains open." He pressed the fragment against the flesh of his own chest, where the bones had long since stopped healing. It sizzled, smoke curled, skin peeled. He screamed, but he held it there, branding it into his own flesh until the glyph carved itself into his breast. His vision went white, his nerves on fire. In that moment, he saw a ruined elf temple where a fragment pulsed beneath a throne of skin, a dark elf sorceress carving names into the bones of a petrified god. A skaven grey seer gnawing at a fragment, hoping to absorb its power. Pharun'tep's pieces were everywhere, and they were growing. Theodric collapsed to the stone floor, panting. Then he rose. He pulled on his cloak, cinched his weapons to his hip, blades forged from slivers of enchanted lizardmen stone, inscribed with seals meant for containment, not death. He strapped his journal to his chest, now a maddened thing of living ink and blood-bound pages, each one screaming when turned. He stood before the cracked mirror at the altar. He was no longer the man who had walked into Ketmekhet all those weeks ago, no longer the scholar of Altdorf, no longer an Imperial relic hunter. He was a warden now, a broken guardian tasked not with discovering knowledge but with sealing it away forever. He bowed his head, and the words came not from memory, but from the echo of Chakla's soul, carried still in the blood-scrawled pages of his journal. "By the will of the Old Ones, by the light of the forgotten stars, by the breath of every soul imprisoned in gilded stillness, I vow I will hunt every shard. I will bind what has broken. I will empty the vault, even if I must bury myself with it." Thunder rolled across the sky. He looked east, toward Sylvania. The fragment pulsed there, and so he walked, into shadow, into pain, into memory. The scholar's oath was made, and he would not break it.